Everybody, my gosh, it's great to be back with my peeps. And I will try to be audience appropriate, since that was suggested as a characteristic that I didn't quite know I had. But it is wonderful to be able to be here as part of BDS 10th rally for medical research. And John, thank you for the incredible work you do all the time with AACR, and to pull all of these many advocacy groups together so that we can speak with one voice about the possibilities and the incredible promise and all that the scientific community is now engaged in ways that are doing things most of us didn't think would happen in our lifetime. And to get that message across is what you're here to do tomorrow. I'm a little differently positioned than the last time I spoke to you, because I was in the position of being the NIH director. Now I'm serving President Biden as his acting science advisor. My office is in the EEOB in one of those long marble halls, surrounded by a lot of other very hardworking people. At NIH, I had 46,000 people who worked for me. In the White House, I have two. One amazing PhD health economist who's working with me on a project to eliminate hepatitis C, which I think we might actually be able to do. And then somebody managed my schedule, and that's it. So these are my notes from what I'm about to say to you. You can see that they were carefully put forward and elegantly put down in appropriate font. I'm so glad we're giving a remarkable recognition tonight to John Porter. John Porter was a champion in so many ways for biomedical research. I had the privilege of working with him back in the day when the Genome Project was just getting started. And I had a memorable meeting with him when there was a threat that maybe the Congress was going to drop back on their support for the Genome Project because there was a private effort that was potentially going to be competitive. And that would have turned out badly, by the way, in terms of access to the data. And I had this meeting with Mr. Porter, and he was supportive of the principles that I was talking about and the science that we were going to do. And at the end of it, I just had enough nerve to say, Mr. Porter, I need you to be a champion for this. I hadn't really planned to say that. And after I said it, I sort of caught myself up and thought, boy, you just went too far there. You can't ask a guy who's supposed to be overseeing appropriations for all of these things in labor, health, and human services to be a champion for this one project. But without hesitation, he said, I'll be your champion. I believe in this. I think this will change everything. It's going to be a hard road, but I'm there and I'm completely on board. And he never wavered from it. In fact, the Genome Project did get done. By the way, 2.5 years ahead of schedule, and $400 million under budget. Might have just had something to do with John Porter. So I will always be grateful to him, and I will miss his presence at those occasions where I got to hang out with him, even in the last few years. You've heard from various members of Congress about wonderful stories of ways in which they have rallied together to help you rally to support medical research. Wonderful to be here with my friend Dick Durbin, and I'm glad you told that story about how the 5% real growth really got started. That was you, and it kind of spread around, and nobody had to own it or take credit for it. It sort of began to gather momentum. May that momentum continue, please. Because, we had that wonderful doubling that John Porter and others made happen back in 1998 to 2003. And that was fantastic. But you know what happened after that? So okay, we did that. Got some other problems now. Oh, there's a little war problem we have to deal with. And Congress basically had other things on their mind. And you know what happened at that point? The budget got flat and inflation eroded it. And by the time we got to 2015, NIH's purchasing power was down by more than 20%, and it was rough. You all were around then. You know what I'm talking about. Success rates are down in single digits. Young investigators trying to get their first grant, having a terrible time just getting off the ground. Something had to give. And it was that concept of, let's not do another doubling because we might have the same after effect. Let's have slow, predictable, steady growth. That's what science needs. The ability to kind of be able to plan. You know what pathway you're on. And Senator Durbin, you had that vision of what we needed at that point. And the fact that it has persisted over these 7 years and hopefully soon to be 8 is just a remarkable testimony to your leadership and your ability to get others to see that as well. And your buddy, yes, Roy Blunt had also a lot of influence in that space, as did others. Patty Murray in the House side, Tom Cole, Rosa DeLauro, all of those folks living up to what we would love to see in all areas of politics, but don't see that much anymore. But in medical research, it is still an area where people can see that this is not a partisan issue, that this has value, this saves lives, it saves money. It's one of the best investments the government can make. So when you go out tomorrow and start meeting with members, the first thing to do is to say thank you. I don't know that members always hear that. Maybe the first you're in the door and you're like, you gotta do this for me. They're hearing that every hour of every day. And some of what they're being asked for, frankly, doesn't have nearly the compelling value as what you have to talk to them about. But start out saying thank you. This Congress has really been wonderfully supportive to NIH, to medical research over the course of these 7 years, and we want that to continue, and being thankful is a good way to start. I do think I'm a little concerned, and this was brought up, I think, by Congresswoman Kasser, about the possibility that this brand new entity of ARPA-H may in some way be seen by some people as competing with resources for NIH. This ought to be a both and, not an either or. I'm a big fan of ARPA-H. The president started advocating for this even before he got elected, and when he became a president, it was one of the first things he wanted to get up and going. And when I was asked to come and be his science advisor back in February, I was given this short list of things to focus on, and the top of the list was ARPA-H. And that, in the course of just that first month, with a lot of wrangling and a lot of help from a lot of people, did result in there getting to be this initial budget of $1 billion for this new entity. And this is an exciting new approach to try to figure out how to fit into those spaces where currently it's hard to get exciting science to go forward at the pace it needs to. Where you have a project that requires partners that would maybe not be traditional NIH grantees and require a lot of program management to try to stay on track, to have really rigorous milestones, to be willing to pull the plug if something's not working, and most importantly, to take really big risks. We're talking about, let's see what we could do with mRNA vaccines for cancer. Okay, that's a really high-risk project. That's going to be expensive. It's going to be complicated. It's going to involve a lot of partners that aren't the traditional R01 grantees. Maybe that's something ARPA-H could do. What about the things that we could do with new technologies? Somebody who thinks that one of the diseases that we manage most poorly right now, which has huge consequences for survival, morbidity, mortality, is hypertension. I guarantee you that in 20 years, people will look back at the way we manage hypertension and wonder, what were you thinking? Because we measure somebody's blood pressure in a circumstance that is not at all representative of what's happening in a 24-hour cycle. And that's, of course, what's doing the harm or helping the body, is where is that? We've got to come up with a way to do a better job. And what would that be? That would be a absolutely well-validated wearable sensor that does 24/7 accurate blood pressure monitoring for people who need to have their medicines adjusted to get it right. That's how you're going to do it. And that's entirely achievable. There's a lot of progress already there, but it needs a big push. What a great ARPA-H project. I don't know if that'll be an ARPA-H project. I'm just suggesting some things. The big news that you probably heard yesterday was the director, the inaugural director of ARPA-H, was in fact announced by the president in the speech at the Kennedy Library in Boston. And it is an absolutely perfectly qualified person to do this, Dr. Renee Wegersen, who was at DARPA for 10 years. She knows that culture, and she worked in the biological technology division of DARPA and did a whole lot of pretty bold projects then as a program manager. And then she was at IARPA for a while, and now she's at Ginkgo Bioworks, which is a very forward-looking synthetic biology company in Boston. She brings all of the skills, the vision, the energy, the fearlessness that ARPA-H is going to need to have. And I want to see that absolutely flourish. NIH is providing the infrastructure to get that off the ground quickly. Adam Russell, serving as the acting deputy director, building that infrastructure so that when Renee arrives in about the beginning of October, this is going to be ready to move quickly. Hire those program managers, figure out those projects, and get going. And this is not going to do the kinds of things that NIH would have been doing anyway. That's not the point. But to pick those areas that otherwise might just move very slowly or not move at all. So let's see what happens there. That's going to deserve a lot of attention, a lot of support. But it would be a terrible thing if that was somehow seen as part of the same overall budget envelope as NIH. And if ARPA-H goes up, NIH takes a hit. That I would be very troubled by an outcome like that, and you should be too. So it's both ends. Let's go there. Other things that I might mention from my perch here in the White House is to tell you that I'm delighted to have a chance in this administration to represent a president who absolutely loves science. If that's not clear to you, it's clear to me because I had the chance to be able to interact on a host of issues. I will tell you, it's a little bit mind-blowing to suddenly be the guy who's supposed to know about anything that has to do with science. So, Dr. Collins, what are we going to do about the semiconductor shortage? Well, I don't know. I better learn about that one. Dr. Collins, is there some new technology that we could use for fighting wildfires? We're having a problem there. I hadn't thought about that. Better work on that one too. It goes on like that, but I'm surrounded by amazing people who have expertise in all sorts of ways, and I guess it doesn't hurt to say, I'm the president's science advisor, and people actually return their calls. So coming back, because I know you guys have been standing for a long time, and there's probably food and drink around here that's going to waste, let me just quickly say, I am so glad to be with you. I am so proud of what you all are doing and the way in which you're going to be making this case about medical research. You can talk about all kinds of specific projects, maybe about the amazing advances in cancer immunotherapy, maybe about curing sickle cell disease with gene therapy, maybe about how we're going to support young investigators by continuing to prioritize them for their support, and how we're going to be focused on diversity, as Dr. Tabak said, as a really important part of our workforce. I should have said, Larry Tabak is an absolute hero in all of this, taking on this role for these many months and managing skillfully and with great abilities to discern what needs to be done first, the oversight of the National Institutes of Health. And we should all be really grateful that he agreed to take that. But for tomorrow and for other chances where you have to make the case, you know what to do. Tell stories. People like to hear about what happened to a real person. Tell stories that you think are examples of both the promise that's already happened and the promise that's yet to be, but could be. I would tell a story that I told to the president of a patient who had metastatic pancreatic cancer and was in one of those amazing immunotherapy protocols at the clinical center that Steve Rosenberg runs, and who had a scan at the beginning of the therapy with dozens of visible metastatic deposits of pancreatic cancer in his liver, and who 6 weeks after the therapy was rescanned. There was no tumor. It was gone. I don't know if it will last. I don't know what the sustainability is. It's the most dramatic example of the way in which this can work when it works. Stories like that. We're on the edge of the most amazing things. We are at an exponential phase of scientific knowledge development and application, and we must not rest if we have a chance to make things go even faster. COVID slowed a lot of things down, but it also showed that the scientific community is capable of heroic actions in the face of the worst pandemic in more than 100 years. When history writes about the pandemic, science will come forward as one of the most remarkable contributors, saving millions of lives by putting everything else off to the side and just absolutely building all that basic science from the previous decades and turning that into vaccines and diagnostics and therapeutics that have changed lives more than we probably even know. So tell those stories too. But most of all, I guess the real story of NIH has always been, while I was director, and it certainly still is now, not just about a government agency. It's about an institution of people people who are dedicated, who really wake up in the morning thinking about how they're going to drive back those frontiers, learn new things, and then figure out how those apply to health. And that's because they have hope. This is, and it always will be, not just the National Institutes of Health, but the National Institutes of Health. So go out there and spread that. Thank you.